Welcome to the Thinking Legal podcast with me, David Kerner. This is a podcast about the human and psychological aspects of the legal sector. I run The Marketing Legal, a legal marketing agency, and you can find us at www.themarketinglegal.com. I hope you enjoy the show. So I'm joined today by Kelli Raker, who's Associate Program Director for Law, Technology and Entrepreneurship Programs at Duke University School of Law. Welcome, Kelli.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yes. I think before we dive into talking about justice tech, it would be really interesting to hear a bit about your background and how you became involved in the legal tech area.
Yeah, that's a really great question because I am not an attorney. And there's kind of two things I think about my career path that led me here. And specifically working at the Duke Center on Law and Tech. And one of them is my background in higher ed and leadership training. And the other is really focused on innovation, especially around equity and social justice. And so I was actually the third full-time employee at a startup nonprofit that closed unexpectedly, and did interact with some attorneys in that process. But I had a short period of unemployment and part-time employment and consulting before I landed here at the law school. And truthfully, I didn't know anything about legal tech, but I knew how to build cohorts of learners. I knew how to build curriculum to help people grow and learn and be leaders. Had some little bit of experience in marketing and technology and was always curious about that and worked with a lot of subject matter experts. And so I ended up getting hired to run the Duke Law Tech Lab, which was our accelerator for legal tech companies back in 2018. And I learned really quickly about legal tech and legal innovation and entrepreneurship, especially among attorneys. So it was a steep and quick learning curve, but I really loved the community that I found here, and especially among the Duke Law community, but also the legal tech community, which is pretty small, but really just wonderful people.
Yes, absolutely. And so you're kind of part of the Duke Center for on Law and Tech. So perhaps you could tell us a bit about that, what it focuses on, and what are some of the current projects that it's involved in.
Sure. I work here with Jeff Ward, who's a faculty member at the law school, who does a lot of teaching on AI and all sorts of emerging technologies and how they intersect with law and ethics. So we have a couple of signature programs and initiatives that we have going on that we've been doing for a couple of years, as well as some that are new. So one of them is focused on law students and innovation. So we've been running some what we call legal design derbies, which is just a kind of marketing way of talking about the way that we teach law students about design thinking. And so we run these programs kind of each fall and each spring that trains law students to solve problems, use human-centered design principles, and just really encourage law students to kind of break out of the usual law school mode and be more creative, be really thoughtful about a practical problem, and think about kind of how the law could be. So we've actually developed a curriculum that other law schools can use as part of our Future of Contracts design derby that we do in the spring, and that's something I'm really proud of. So legal education is one chunk of what we do. And the other piece is really about trying to impact positively the legal system and around technology. And so kind of two things that I spend a lot of time on is this justice tech work. So was the Duke Law Tech Lab, then it became some research and projects and partnerships with other people who are working in this space. And then a new project that we have is called Rails, the Responsible AI and Legal Services. And this is a network that's bringing people together across the industry. So corporations and law firms, tech providers, access to justice groups, the judiciary, really focusing on responsible, ethical, safe use of AI around legal services. And so this is new, just launched this year. But we have about 300 some people in our network, and right now 4 different working groups, soon to be 5 and maybe 6, who are working on different projects, trying to really dig into AI, and it keeps changing quickly. But folks are
trying
to
really
understand what does this look like in legal, and how do we do it responsibly.
Yeah, and do you work kind of hand in hand with law firms on that? Because I know that they're doing a lot of experimentation with AI at the moment.
Yes, we have folks representing large international law firms who have spent a lot of money on their AI products. We have small legal aid and folks that charge on a sliding scale and are doing more access to justice focused work who are in these conversations. And so it's really, and as well as people in kind of small and medium law firms. So it's really a wide group of people, and it's amazing actually to sit in the room, the virtual room, because we did them on Zoom, with them and talk about both what we have in common and also where there have been some really clear differences about what people have had access to and where people see things could go.
Yeah, yeah, and as you say, one of the big focuses of the centre is access to justice. So maybe you could outline what is access to justice, and what are some of the ways that people in tech have sought to address it.
Absolutely. I think for me, as a quote unquote non attorney, it's really helpful to just lay out some of the truths about our legal system that we don't always say or always talk about in order to really understand access to justice. So the system is complex. It's also opaque, and it was built for lawyers. So while we have a ton of attorneys in the United States, most of them are serving medium and large for profit corporations as their clients. So that's who gets most of our legal services in the US. The average person who has a legal issue, especially a civil legal issue, they can't find or they can't afford an attorney, or honestly, they don't even realize they have a legal problem. A lot of civil legal problems like domestic violence and divorce, custody, landlord tenant issues, wills and trusts, all of that stuff. Um, there's so many layers to those problems in society, and they're connected to other systems like healthcare and housing. And so for a lot of people, that legal part is just one piece of it. And it's not always the most critical or obvious thing, but it is part of it and has to be addressed. This is true for small businesses too, right? Like legal is not always the first thing that they have access to. There's so much data about the access to justice gap. In the United States, Legal Services Corporation has a justice gap report that they put out all the time. Definitely recommend those options. And so a lot of what folks need is legal information and legal advice that's specific to their.
Yeah, and do you think you could point to a few specific examples, perhaps that have come out of Duke that are really making a difference, and perhaps how they managed to reach the people that really need to use this tech as well?
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure to work with all these different companies through the Duke Law Tech Lab. A couple of them have actually started working together to create a new trade association called the Justice Tech Association. And so I'll tell you about those three founders because they're really doing some amazing work. One of them is Aaron Levine, who runs Hello Divorce, which started in California but has branched out to a lot of other states in the United States and different jurisdictions. And what's really fascinating and innovative about what Erin does is she has found different ways to use paralegals and other folks in her work, and also created a lot of really amazing information online, and not just legal information, but also like wellness information. And she's also found ways to streamline the processes that people get help from. So Hello Divorce is a great option. Um, Sonia Ebron here in North Carolina runs Courtroom 5, along with her co-founder, Deborah Sloan. And that's really about empowering self-represented folks. And so her product is one that, or their product is one that where folks can get the information they need to go to court on their own and deal with a civil problem. And they've just added in some new AI features into their product as well. And then last, I would mention Yusuf Kasim with Easy Expunctions, which started and is based out of Texas, but has grown to other states as well, I think Florida and Indiana, and really helping people know if they're eligible for an expunction from their record, and finding a way to do that much more cheaply than an attorney. All of these, Hello Divorce and Easy Expunctions, helping people access it way cheaper than the hourly rate of an attorney, and really on a structured fee-for-service sort of model so that people know what it's going to get them and be able to connect them to more resources if they need them. So if what their basics can't provide, they can do something else. And all three of these folks are so committed to making sure that they're serving people who are otherwise not getting help from the legal system and from our system at large.
Right. And obviously these people tend to be kind of difficult to reach. So what are some of the strategies these kind of founders are taking to connect with their with the people that would benefit from this?
Absolutely. Great question. So we did some research back in 2021 where I talked to almost 20 founders individually about their experience running a company, and was able to publish a report in fall 2023 about that. So I don't want to talk about just those three folks, but really, other folks as well. And I talked to founders who were just getting started versus had much larger startups that have been around a little bit longer. And I have a lot more data to analyze too. But the founders in particular are people who, what we call mission driven mavericks. So these are folks who have a lot of experience firsthand with the legal problem that they're helping solve. Some of them had worked as attorneys who were helping people repeatedly deal with the same issue over and over again, and thought, like, I could do this, I could reach more people if I could streamline this process and find different ways to reach them. And that's when they started building tech into their work. But also non-lawyer founders. Some of them are technologists, some are people who represented themselves and worked their way through the system very challengingly, and wanted to tell other people how to do that because they were like, well, gosh, I didn't need a lawyer. It would have been helpful at times, but I could do this myself. And if I could help other people do that, that would be amazing. And so these folks are really knowledgeable about the issue for themselves, but they also listen to users and they found ways to reach them and really hear and get that feedback from them over and over again to improve their products over time.
Yeah, and in your role, you've conducted numerous interviews with people that would use these services with respect to access to justice. What are some of the stories you've come across in your research?
Yeah, it actually was really hard to find folks who had used the tech products themselves. But I did talk to a lot of people who didn't have access to a lawyer, and tried to solve the problem with or without any type of technology. And so I think the first thing to know is that people who don't have a lawyer are still going to use every resource that they can find. And so for the folks I talked to, that was Reddit, that was Facebook groups, that was friends who are a lawyer in a different type of work who don't even realize that that person can't really help them. And same with law students, right? They're like trying to just talk to anyone who can help them understand the process, understand specifics about their case. And so they didn't know that they won't find information specific to their situation on the internet. Some of them get that there are different jurisdictions in the United States and that, if they get a traffic ticket in a certain county, that's where they have to go resolve it. But they don't really always know how to find that information. And so they were telling me stories about searching on a court's website that maybe wasn't that user friendly, to try to find out how to solve their problem, especially if they lived states away. Lots of different ways that they were trying to problem solve this themselves. And it was hard, right? It's hard. And so they use technology in lots of different ways, and not necessarily a tech product, but they didn't have an attorney, they couldn't afford an attorney, or they didn't think their issue was really worthy of spending lots of money on an attorney.
Yes.
But they still have to solve it.
Right. And I guess that kind of brings in the difference between legal information and legal advice. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about what both of those terms mean.
Absolutely. And we haven't really defined it clearly.
Yeah.
And different states define it, like the practice of law itself, differently in different jurisdictions.
Yes.
Which is extra complicated for both lawyers and founders and the people they're trying to serve.
Absolutely. Obviously you're based in the US, but are you aware of what's happening in other jurisdictions as well?
Yeah, we've been able to talk to people in different countries around the world, and every legal system has its problems. Like, there's no system out there that is doing things perfectly that we should all be emulating. And so different tech products are responding to the market. Like, that's what they're doing to be successful and to solve the problems that the folks need. And so in one country that might be about, changing, how people get access to a lawyer, but other folks it might be about the actual system itself and helping with mediation, for example. So there's really a lot of different ways that people have tried to tackle these problems around the world. And I think I didn't study international groups as part of our research, but I did interact with them a lot as part of our tech lab. And everyone's out there trying to make things better, but there's not just one way of doing things. And actually, that's what this area of law and of legal tech needs. And that's the creativity and innovation to try to figure out how do we solve these really hard problems.
Yeah, of course, of course. And I know that you kind of mentioned that it's difficult to predict what's going to happen in the future. But are there certain issues that you can see coming around the corner? What's the cutting edge in terms of justice tech at the moment?
Yeah, right now everybody's trying to figure out how to use AI in their products and how to do that responsibly and in a way that is going to help and not just make things more complicated. Right now, we already know people are using ChatGPT to write a demand letter or a letter to their landlord. Like that's already happening. Whether or not they should be, that's a different question. But people are trying to use what resources they have, and so getting access to legal research tools and just generally increasing the legal knowledge of our population is certainly something we have to do because they're finding ways to do it. But what I hope happens is that there will be more partnerships between groups who've traditionally been really siloed in our system. So justice tech and legal tech in general, working more with legal aid and helping them be more tech forward, working with nonprofits who are using a sliding scale for their legal services, justice tech and law clinics at law schools. I think there's lots of ways for us to partner with people who have the same shared values, but maybe haven't been given the same funding streams or the same opportunities to actually get in a room together. So finally, I think there's a lot of room for consumer facing products in our market, at least in the United States. That direct to consumer market is growing. It's huge, and we don't talk about it very much. And funders aren't totally paying attention yet, but they should be. This is a really growing area because there's this huge need of people who need help with their legal information and legal advice, and there's opportunities to help a lot of people, and not just make money from them, but
Right.
but really help them.
Well, yeah, I guess the key thing is affordability, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So being able to know that you're going to pay $200 or $300 to solve your problem versus thousands or an unknown amount of money to solve a legal problem, that makes a difference for the average person who doesn't have a lot of money in their bank account, or who doesn't, can't promise that they're going to be able to pay a bill down the road. I have friends that when they got divorced and they're like, I have to come up with a $10,000 retainer. Like, how do
Yeah.
people do that? It's hard for the average person.
It is. It is. Um, all right. Thank you, Kelly. And if people want to kind of look into what the Center on Law and Tech does, how can they find it?
Absolutely. We're at the Duke Law website, law.duke.edu/DCLT. In Rails, you can find us at rails.legal. Great way to sign up and get involved with our free
Yes.
network. Come get involved, help us make sure that we're creating a responsible ecosystem for access to justice and for AI in legal services.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thanks so much. Good to talk to you today.
You too.